Wednesday, March 23rd. I'm Councilman Mike Bonham, the chair. Please, Sergeant, could we please make sure there's some quiet in the room? Thank you. Welcome to the committee meeting, Transportation Committee of March 23rd. I'm Mike Bonham, the chair. I'm joined by my colleagues Nuri Martinez and David Rue of the 6th and the 4th districts, respectively. Before we get started, let's do our customary multimodal roll call. In the past 2 weeks, who has commuted by train? All right, about a third of the room. By bus? About a third of the room. Pedestrian? Well, it should be everybody. You've all walked at some point in your commute. Bicycle? Very good. Very good. I'm happy to report that I converted a 2-year-old to, what did I miss? No. No. And happy to report that I converted a 2-year-old into being a bus fan. After pointing them out with exuberance for a few months, he took his first bus ride the other day and is now hooked on buses and went to the library and checked out a book, The Bus is for Us. The next generation will be using multimodal transportation in Los Angeles. So, with that, we have a busy agenda today, and we are not going to have time to get through all of the items on the agenda today because there's a homelessness committee meeting at 3. So I am going to recommend that we do today many of the parking reform items, but continue items 5 and 6, the update on the 5-year plan and the keeping the meter money in local neighborhoods until our next meeting. So we'll be doing items 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, and 8 today. We have a number of speaker cards, most of them by Mr. Herman and Mr. Spindler. So in order for the meeting to flow, I'm going to give you each 5 minutes at the start to use up all of your time.
Yes, the conducting of meetings. Downstairs, you were all there. You continue to let your colleagues violate the Ralph M. Brown Act. You have to stop that. You got to start standing up for the city charter, not your friends. So when you see the city charter versus your friends, the city charter is going to win every single time. People are trying to talk. Chair does something nuts. One of you 15, one of you other 14's got to get the hell up and say something, because if you don't, after a while it becomes a pattern. Now, I was just listening after I got thrown out of the council meeting. I noticed there was over a $6 million settlement on a closed session item. $6.4 million.
That item isn't before this. You have to
yes,
keep
it is. It's about general. It affects the budget of this committee, because that's $6-point-something million less for your committee, isn't it?
Mr. Spindler, I've been incredibly generous in giving you 5 minutes here. You need to speak to the items that are on this agenda, or I'm going to ask you to leave.
But which includes general public comment, right?
About matters before this committee?
Yes. And the budget is part of this committee, isn't it? So when one item supersedes another in the millions of dollars, you have to take that money out of all the other budgets, including transportation. It's got to stop. City's on fire. And you look at all of this crap, especially you get to the third item, what you're doing with item 3 is you're trying to mask something behind something else. You're trying to stop the people with the campers living in their campers for free. That's what you're doing here. You call them oversized vehicles. No, they are being targeted because they are RVs that are being lived in by people. And I went into your District 11, and they're all over the place, parked on both sides of the streets, because people can live in their RVs for free. They don't have to pay rent. That's called innovation. But to our middle class, NIMBY assholes that live in CD 11, that's called get rid of homeless people, get rid of poor people. You call it establishing oversized vehicle restricted area. The Ninth Circuit and the federal courts are going to call it something different. They're going to call it de facto discrimination. You really are not consulting the truth with the city attorney. How many of this are there now? There's got to be 30 of these, 40 of these pending. It becomes a pattern and practice of discrimination against homeless. And you don't call it oversized vehicles. Say what it is. You don't want poor people finding a way not to pay your over ridiculous rents by living in oversized vehicles on the streets. See, a lot of you come from poor families. But you forgot about that. Because you're sitting there with your six-figure salaries and your 30-member staffs and your $3 million office accounts, and you forgot that you came, many of you, from people that were dirt poor. These people are poor. Find them a place to park. Bill Rosendahl, before he got sick, was working on that in CD 11. He wanted to come up with a way for these people to park in a parking lot and get off the streets. That's not your solution, though. Your solution is to put them in a de facto concentration camp style enforcement mode. So eventually, just like me today being thrown out of a meeting, you're going to throw them out of Venice and out of CD 11 and out of all these other zones by towing their vehicles away, arresting them, and taking away the one form of dignity they have left, which is their homes, which are these vehicles. Your economic policies made them poor. You're responsible for that. Your zoning and your rezoning and your raising of rents and your approval of Airbnb is why they're homeless. They're homeless because you made them homeless. So take care of your problem and give these people a place to park. Give them money to find jobs and job training instead of doing this stupid bullshit. Because what this is going to be is people being arrested, losing their property, finding an ACLU attorney, National Lawyers Guild, which got arrested Tuesday over there in an immigration protest, and they are going to sue you people, and then we'll have another $6.4 million. Like today, it'll be called the Homeless Oversized Vehicle Restricted Class Action Lawsuit. And I say, good. People need to rise up and defeat the city machine.
Thank you. Mr. Herman, you have an opportunity to elevate the discussion.
Mr. Speaker, does this include general public comment? Yes. That's fucking great. Because me and Woof Woof want to talk about why did the poverty pimp downstairs kick me out of a public meeting?
I just want to remind you, Mr.
Right,
Herman,
I'm on general public comment.
General public comment in this meeting is for matters before this committee, so they've got to be transportation related.
All right. Well, when I walked over to council chambers this morning, when I got off the train, got on a bus at 5 in the morning, get at a public meeting by 9, that racists kicked me out of a public meeting. Violation of the Brown Act. And in regards to Mr. Bonin with his relative directing of LA DOT to report the necessary resources to electronically inventory of city parking assets in the public right-of-way. Who are you to say what a public right-of-way is? Who the fuck tells people what a public right-of-way is? Isn't a public right-of-way a place for people to mobilize from one end to another? But no one cares. I watched them illegally kick the homeless off the sidewalk and streets off of Aliso in Los Angeles. But no one cares. No one with goddamn right attitude cares. And then looking at item 3, relative established and oversized vehicles, asking homeless people to take their fucking belongings and pack it up in the RV and get the fuck off the street. Another issue of retaliation and harassment to the homeless population. The war on homelessness. by poverty pimps who continue to pad their wallets and stuff their fat fucking mouths with all the issues that we go through on a day-to-day basis being homeless. Woo, woo. And that's why I brought my comfort dog today, to give me comfort, to keep this PG-13. See, the chuckles are all in favor of that. Woo, woo, woo. See? And so why do we have to remove RVs from the streets? We don't have affordable housing. Those niggers don't have any type of housing. And I'm one working nigger in the Grand Master's house, the city of Los Angeles, who calls themselves the poverty pimps. But this little Negro from Boyle Heights has standards, equal access, opportunity to work and live in the Negro country of Los Angeles. So I know this little Negro boy ain't wrong from Boyle Heights. He motherfucker knows what he's talking about when he comes out of poverty. But I don't have to collect cans. I don't have to rubbish through my plastic. Because a nigger believes in the American Disability Act, which provides me substantial income to fuck with people who fuck with me in my neighborhoods when I sleep in my RV, sleep in my car any fucking time I want. I didn't ask for painted red curbs. I did not ask for some motherfucking officer to walk up to me and bang on my window, tell me get the fuck off my street. That's why those niggas live hard and roll hard. We call to order. Order, order. Niggers on a roll. Get my RV car, park wherever I go. It's a different song. Not related to niggas with attitude, but my nigger attitude. My attitude about how elected officials use their sovereignty of power on Sunset Avenue between Rose Avenue and Lincoln Boulevard. Section 22507. Fuck that. Motherfucker. I live in the street. I know what hard life is all about. Just like the 44,000 homeless people, motherfuckers living in their car and RVs. But let's talk about now our USC people. The program in Venice, Expo, USC Hollywood. Further expansion for program citywide. I oppose that motherfucker. Put some money for us to park our RVs. Put some money to remove meters so I can park my car on the fucking street with my blue handicap placard. Am I wrong? Have I been wrong? Is anyone wrong for being homeless? What's the dignity of you barking dogs? Woo, woo, woo.
Thank you. And that concludes their comments for today and also concludes public comment for the day. General public comment. There's also comment for the individual items on the agenda. Colleagues, I'd like to recommend remove items 2 and 3 on consent. Is there any objection? I should also note for the record that we've been joined by Mr. Weezar. And with that, we will go to item number 1, which is a report from the General Manager.
Good afternoon, council members. First and foremost, as we normally do, I want to recognize some of the outstanding employees that we have at the Department of Transportation. I'm going to ask you to stand. First, I would like to recognize Senior Traffic Supervisor Cortez Jones. Sergeant Jones consistently goes above the call of duty and is known for his ability to respond quickly to emergencies or find solutions to a problem that his officers may encounter. During a recent storm that created road hazards and traffic nightmares for city drivers, an officer requested assistance from the Bureau of Street Services due to large tree branches blocking traffic lanes on a major street. Because of the heavy demand for their services, a response to the location was going to take a while. Recognizing the importance of clearing the thoroughfare, Sergeant Jones responded and removed the branches himself. His prompt action reopened the lanes of traffic and allowed street services to respond to other locations. In another incident, one of his officers came upon a large pile of construction debris in the roadway that presented a hazard to motorists and a liability for the city. He recognized the urgency and he responded to the location with 2 shovels. Together, he and the officer removed the debris from the lanes, which allowed traffic to flow safely, and coned off the debris for street maintenance to pick up later. Sergeant Jones's dedication to his duty is commendable. He is a premier member of this department who provides an excellent example for all traffic supervisors and officers. Thank you for providing the city with your outstanding leadership and effort for the past 26 years. And now we have 2 very special individuals from our mobility management group. First, Chun-Ming Yen is a transportation planning associate. Chun-Ming has played a quiet but critical role in LADOT transit bus services. His experience and expertise in analyzing the feasibility of commuter express and dash routes has contributed significantly to our growth and success for decades. He tackles mountains of data and turns them into comprehensible molehills of usable information. He sets a great example by riding the commuter express line 448 to work while serving as a mystery rider who monitors and reports on the quality of bus service to LADOT transit managers. Chun-Ming is respected by his colleagues for his competency, exemplary work habits, courtesy, and good humor. Thank you so much for listening. And next, Tommy Melendez, Equipment Specialist 2, is the head of the Maintenance Support Group of the Transit Bureau. He ensures that our fleet of 356 commuter express, dash, and city ride vehicles are properly maintained by private contractors. During the past 16 months in this position, he and his staff of equipment specialists have diligently performed detailed annual inspections on the entire bus fleet to ensure public safety. Due to his leadership and dedication, a recent unannounced California Highway Patrol inspection at one of the facilities did not reveal any issues in the buses inspected or in the paperwork reviewed. Tommy is also a certified forklift trainer and has already trained over 50 LADOT field operations staff. He's a team player, always willing to assist no matter how large or small a task might be. He is an invaluable asset to the department. And last but not least, I wanted to make a special mention. Our Assistant General Manager, Selwyn Hollins, who's been with the department for over 10 years, is moving on to a position with the Office of Finance. Selwyn has been invaluable. He has worked for LAWA, Department of Water and Power, and personnel. He brings pride, respect, and excellent management and leadership to everything he does. It is a huge, huge loss for the department, but it is tremendous that he's staying in the city because he is truly one of the best in the business. So this may be his last Transportation Committee meeting, and I just wanted to take a moment to recognize his outstanding contributions. He will be very sorely missed at the Department of Transportation.
Thank you for the presentation. And let me just, before all the honorees walk out, let me just say, I know you're all eager to get back to work. That's cool. I just wanted to thank you as well. I love that your general manager comes here and does these presentations once a month so that the folks who actually get the work done in the department, who are sort of the unsung heroes that we never see, get some recognition. And I just want to thank all 3 of you for the work that you've done and the work that you continue to do. Thanks very much. Mr. Rue.
Mr. Chair, before they leave, I really want to thank you for what you do here with your committee and always recognizing. I am I mean, like it's all the small things, like Sergeant Jones, you're getting out of your car, using a shovel to actually clear the road. I mean, it's all these things that not just Department of Transportation does, but citywide, all the different departments, where it doesn't get recognized. And it's all those little things added together that makes our city great, which is why a personnel committee, because of what you do here, we've instructed personnel department to see how we could do what you do here, citywide, and maybe do do some sort of STARS achievement where we recognize departments and individuals throughout the city on some sort of frequent basis. So I really want to commend what you do, Mr. Chair. And
thank you.
And I always talk about it in the personnel department. And finally, we're going to try to memorialize it throughout the city.
Thank you. Well, it was Salita's idea, so she gets all the credit for that.
Thank you.
Mr. Huizar.
Thank you. Job well done, Salita and my Councilmember Bonin. Congratulations to all of you. Job well done. The only thing is that I think you were a mystery writer on our bus. You're no longer going to be the mystery writer. Everyone knows who you are. So that's the guy who's looking out to make sure our buses are running well. So
yeah, right.
Thank you. Congratulations to all of you.
I should say I'm not at all happy about the news about Selwyn leaving. Selwyn was actually, most folks don't know this, but was part of the panel that selected the DOT general manager, so he's partially responsible for the fact that we're lucky enough to have you here. Selwyn has been a great asset to the department, a go-to guy, someone who helped us get to yes. I think it was a credit to the kind of guy he is that so many of his fellow employees stood up to give him a standing O when you gave him the acknowledgement there. I'm glad he's still going to be with the city at the Office of Finance, and as I told him on the way in, the fact that he is betraying us by moving over there, I will take it out on him in Budget and Finance Committee.
Yeah, he made sure to remind me during that interview that Los Angeles is the greatest city in the world, because at the time I was working for San Francisco, and there's no way that I would have made it, that I would have lasted this long without his guidance and leadership and advice, so we're going to miss him a lot.
Great. Thank you.
I'm happy to take any other questions about general DOT matters from the committee members. I don't have any other updates or reports. Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Seeing none, thank you very much. All right, that brings us to item number 4.
Item number 4 is a Bonin-Busk.
Yes, sir. I had a card in number. Oh, you did. I'm sorry. My apologies. He's absolutely right. So, Bobby Pepe. My apologies, sir.
Councilmember Martinez, I see you again. Council members. Regarding the proposed removal of the side crosswalk on Sunset Boulevard east of Vermont in front of the Children's Hospital as a traffic safety measure, this runs against the grain of any reasonable measure by LA DOT to increase pedestrian safety for potential traffic collisions. It in fact increases the risk exponentially due to the resulting increased traffic speeds and removing the driver expectations of pedestrians in the area. This is directly in front of Children's Hospital, where children and families walk, as well as other pedestrians, including those with disabilities, who need as many crossing options as possible. This particular crosswalk is also used by many metro station users, those walking to the Kaiser facility at 1550 North Vermont, and the medical center, and the many residents who live north of Sunset. This crosswalk is not used only by hospital employees, patients, and families. It is used by our whole community.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much. So before we move to item 4, we're going to be doing items 4, item 7, and item 8. They're all about parking reform. Let me just say, first of all, that before we get into those items, I just want to take a moment to frame the larger issue that we're discussing here, which is making parking smarter and more fair for people in Los Angeles. Earlier this year, this committee heard a report from the Parking Reform Working Group, which was convened by Mayor Garcetti, composed of residents and stakeholders throughout the city. A key player, a driving force behind that, Mr. Jay Bieber, who's here with us today. Thank you and your colleagues for all the work that you did. The working group made a series of phenomenal, really phenomenal suggestions for reforming how we can improve the way we manage parking in Los Angeles, how we deal with tickets in Los Angeles, and as a result, this committee and I made a series of requests and recommendations to advance many of those reforms. And it's my feeling that the parking reform legislation that we're discussing today and will continue to discuss over a series of weeks and months in this committee is one of the best ways we can show people that government can be on their sides and not on their backs. There are a few things that are more personable or more personal and relatable for people in Los Angeles than parking. It's something that almost everybody deals with, and most folks, it's one of their points of intersection with government, and it almost feels for most people as if it's an adversarial relationship with the city, and that's something that I think that we can change. So the motions I introduced, which grew out of the great work of Jay and the Planning Reform Working Group and Mayor Garcetti's office, will help accelerate the use of demand-based pricing at meters. They'll help people use apps and smartphones to pay for parking and avoid tickets, and they'll help protect people from egregious parking fines, and will help keep parking revenues in the communities where it's generated. The motions we introduced separately, although they were proposed as one package, so we could act quickly on the ones that were ready to go and not let the ones that needed a little more time hold things up. So today we're going to talk about Code the Curb, rolling out or accelerating the Express Park program, and the street sweeping stuff. We will continue until the next meeting, the financial aspects, the 5-year plan, and the keeping money in local neighborhoods. And then the other items which are on the parking reform agenda that were introduced, we'll be dealing with in the next couple months. It's going to be an ongoing discussion that will be central to what we do here. So just with that introduction, let's now go to item number 4.
Item number 4 is a Bon and Buscaino motion relative to directing DOT, the Bureau of Street Services, and the CAO to report on parking violations on street cleaning days and related matters.
Staff going to come up? Good afternoon. Anybody from DOT joining you for the presentation? Chief Savelli, great. Thank you. Thank you both for being here. As Chief comes up, let me just sort of set this up, as I think this is one of the things that drives people most nuts in the world is when there's posted street sweeping hours in front of their home or business, and the street sweeper doesn't come by, and they get a ticket. Or the street sweeper comes by at 9:15, and they're there at 10, and they still get a ticket even though the street sweeper's already gone by. So one of the ideas here was to create the technological framework so that DOT and Public Works can talk to each other better, and so that we can alert folks when a street sweeper has gone by and when it's safe to park again in the neighborhood. So give us an update on where we are.
Okay, well, I'll go ahead and start. Good afternoon. Keith Mosey, Bureau of Street Services. I provided a handout which will cover some of the basic fundamentals that the GPS system will cover. And I'd like to say that we are very excited about this grant-funded project, as this will provide more efficiency and transparency between city agencies in the sharing of information, working closer together to improve collection of data and efficiencies to provide better customer service. As of today, we have installed over 30 GPS sensors and anticipate completion working with GSD by June 2016. The data collection that will allow BSS, which is covered in the handout, to digitize routes, to improve sweeping efficiency as part of sustainability, monitor water usage, and see when brooms are in use, to include when the sweeper is dumping. The interface of the digitized routes will be provided to DOT, and right now we're in the infancy phase of building this technology so that we can better share information with the Department of Transportation to address these issues that you're speaking of.
I can give you a status of how we're doing it today. We monitor the BSS route relaxation requests. So each day they send us a list of routes that they want the parking enforcement relaxed so that we don't don't issue tickets, being fair to those that are parked in an area that is not being swept. That technology involves radio transmissions, roll call, briefings, and then ultimately they are broadcast over the radio for each area office to stop enforcement if it comes after the enforcement time starts. That happens rarely, but it does happen. We have gone from issuing several thousand tickets in error down to less than 100 a week. And those are
over what period of time?
It's probably been close to a year now since we started the direct communications that we don't verify that, but it's been close to a year. And basically what we do, it's caught by us and our vendor, Xerox, our processor, and then we automatically initiate even if the person sometimes doesn't know that they got the sweeper didn't go by, so they don't contest it. So in this scenario, we initiate the rescission and take back the citation and rebate any money that is paid. Our goal is to catch them as quickly as possible so they don't remit any money, but generally about a half a dozen or so a week have already paid, so they've paid from the windshield, so they're very conscientious, but we do refund that money. What they're working on now with this data that we get from BSS is a method with our vendor to immediately communicate to the handheld devices carried by the traffic officers that the route is canceled. This is an interim step. It's not going to be exactly what we want yet, but basically they'll be able to broadcast similar to a text message to the ticket writing device that says this route is canceled. Ultimately, with the cooperation and the collaboration with all three of us, our vendor, our partners at BSS, and ourselves, we want it to be able to tell us, don't write that ticket, to be able to talk to our handheld that says the sweeper has gone by, don't issue the citation. Because oftentimes our officers could be before or after the sweeper, as the window is up to 2 hours in some areas.
So the motion that I submitted had 4 elements to it, and if you could just give me an update on where we are with each of them. The first one was to incorporate GPS tracking on all street sweeping vehicles. Where are we on that?
As of today, we've installed 30 GPS units, and right now 12 are currently working, and we are starting to collect data, and we are analyzing that data now. We're working with GSD. We anticipate that being completed by June 2016, in the next few months. So we're working with GSD to expedite that as soon as possible.
To have them on all of your street sweepers?
Yes.
By June of this year?
Yes.
Great. Okay, fantastic. So it's on 30 now. What percentage of the street sweepers is that?
Approximately 30%.
Okay, all right. And you think you'll get it all done in the next 90 days?
Yes.
Okay, that's phenomenal. The second item was to improve communication between sweeping vehicles and parking enforcement officers. You talked about that. One of the things I understand, Chief, you mentioned the cooperation of your vendor. Is that Xerox?
Yes.
Okay.
And they are here today. They anticipate next month a rollout of that broadcast system that I mentioned,
Yep.
where at least it's going out over the handheld device. They're not dependent solely on roll call or radio broadcast. So that'll be a third mechanism in which we're notifying the officers of canceled routes.
Okay. Item 3 was to examine the feasibility of creating a digital street sweeping notification system for subscribers. How are we doing on that?
Yeah, that's going to be cooperation with BSS and Xerox. We have set up meetings with the vendors and BSS to see, for BSS's vendor for GPS, as well as our vendor for our ticket writers, and they are going to get together. In fact, we met with Peter Marks last week about the direction in which this should take. It's time-consuming, but he doesn't see it as impossible, and he believes that progress can be made.
But I think to the councilman's question, that's just about how Bureau of Street Services sweepers communicate with our traffic officers.
Right.
Your question is about neighborhood notification,
Yes. Oh,
right? And we would defer to BSS on that answer.
And right now we're working on that as far as developing the software with Xerox and working with DOT to see how we can basically collect this data and basically seamlessly send the digitized routes to DOT so that it can be given to their customers, so to speak, and possibly app form, something like that, where you can actually see where we are in real time, maybe pull up a website. So we're in that basically infancy stage right now trying to develop that particular information.
Who are we envisioning manages sending the text alerts to subscribers? Street Services or DOT?
Well, right now, we want to provide our digitized routes to LADOT, and then that way they can provide it to their customers how they see fit.
Mr. Chair, I have a
Yes, Ms. Martinez.
So is this, my question is, so are you referring to how the public gets access to the GPS information? Is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
So would you develop an app or a website so that folks in that area know when street sweeping has already occurred?
At this time, I really can't answer that. We're trying to develop that and see what would be easier.
Or do you anticipate when you're going to
I would
have the software? Are we working with Xerox to develop the software, or are we doing it in-house?
The Xerox work is really to focus on how the street services communicates with our officers and our vehicles. I don't think that there's not clarity yet on how it gets pushed out to the public. Currently, Bureau of Street Services takes that role. They push that out to the public on their website in sort of a, so in somewhat of a passive way. So you go check the website, you can see. What that evolution looks like, I think, is not determined.
But we are going to move in that direction, correct?
Yes.
Sir?
That's clearly part of the motion that we'll be working on together.
So right now, you're dealing with the automation. How do we communicate between the street sweeper and our traffic officers once the street sweeping has already occurred?
Correct.
Okay, got it.
Great. Mr. Rue, questions?
Yeah, so all the parking reduction tickets that you said that you reversed, so they were based on what?
For example, we'll get a list of canceled routes. Generally, they arrive around 7:45, but some of our officers they go to roll call at 7. The route may be from 8 to 10, so it gives us a narrow window in which to get the information out to the officers, and they may arrive at 8 o'clock and start issuing citations. So the system is set up that if they did that and they beat the notification, that we have reviewed, us and our vendors have reviewed those citations and automatically recall them.
So, but currently, if those sweeping routes where it was canceled, the public doesn't know that it's canceled.
No, it is posted, as the general manager mentioned. It's posted on the BSS website, and it's not necessarily canceled. The sweepers still may go by, but they're not guaranteeing they're going to be there. So for that reason, they want to get what they call relax the enforcement in that area.
So we haven't implemented any of the new technologies, or we're going to, right, in the future? The only question I wanted to ask is, there are, I don't know how, but, there's certain areas if we could maybe do a pilot or prioritize. And what I mean is like areas where, like the LA County Mental Courthouse, the area like 1150 North San Fernando, it's hard to park there to begin with, but on street sweeping days, it exacerbates the situation, and a lot of people are trying to go to mental health courts, doctors to testify, and other folks. So when we do come up with the system, is there some way, I don't want to make it more difficult than it already is, but any way to prioritize high utilized areas first?
Yes, we can look at that. Try and find, like you say, a pilot area.
Yeah. So, it just doesn't have to, the mental health court is just an example, but any kind of courts, City Hall, a lot of places where a lot of people congregate and where time is of the essence. So we could do that. And then also I'd like to recognize Jay Bieber, who is a great transportation advocate, but he's a member of Council District 4. And I speak to him all the time, and he's got a plethora of ideas, and I'm glad that we're moving on them, and we'll be in constant communication with Jay to make sure, while we can't implement everything right away today, I thank you for your leadership, Mr. Chair, for bringing all these up forward.
Thank you. Since you mentioned Jay, he has a public comment card. Jay, why don't you come up and give us your public comment, followed by Hillary Norton.
Thank you, and thank you for your kind comments, and also to Councilmember Rue as well. We obviously are in support of what's happening, and there are a couple of things we wanted to mention. As this GPS system rolls out, one of the things that the department will have is to know on a more consistent basis where those street sweepers are and what their routes are. And one of the things we were hoping that might eventually happen is to maybe reduce that time window from maybe the 2 hours or some places 3 or more hours to reduce it. And the more you do that, the less you have to worry about whether the street sweeper went by. So that was something we're looking for in the future. Also, as far as in residential areas, sometimes the street sweeping does start earlier than 9 a.m., and we were hoping that if they could look at those things, that would be helpful as well to start after that. And they're going to need some funding for a lot of this, so as the budget process goes forward, we want the council members here and to talk to your colleagues and help them out with some of that funding. Thank you.
Thank you. Hillary?
Thank you. Good afternoon, council members. As one of the members of the LA Parking Reform Working Group, I'm here also to support Jay, but support your motions, because these are really incredibly well thought, and I want to talk, because you have limited time, I want to speak on 4, 7, and 8. And that is that implementing these as quickly as possible is not only good for using space better on our streets, but it's also good for our own budgets. And there are a couple things I would add to Jay's comments, and I completely agree with him on the issue about after 9 o'clock for residential areas, but the other is after 9 o'clock for areas near schools, so that parents can drop off their kids, have the routes start after 9 o'clock, maybe even move them so that those spaces won't be needed as much after school hours. In addition, to focus on any traffic violations that are happening in those street cleaning areas, that money can come back to the community, just like you're asking in 5 and 6.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks to Jay and Hillary for their work on the committee and for their comments. Hillary's last comment about the schools actually reminds me, I forgot to ask about the fourth point in the motion, which was to catalog and map all the cleaning routes to reduce conflicts with other municipal activities such as school pickup, drop-off, sanitation pickup, and stuff like that. How are we doing on that?
I'll have to report back on that one, council member.
You have to report back on that?
Yes.
Okay. All right, not the answer I was hoping for, but what I was going to do, colleagues, is ask for two things. One, that we have a subsequent report in 90 days. Before that time, I'd like to ask Street Services to provide the data from the new GPS street sweeper technology to DOT so they can expedite the communication and the coordination between the street sweepers and the parking enforcement officers. I appreciate everything you've done. I want to make sure that continues. Two, I want to direct both DOT and Street Services to report in 90 days with a proposed scope, schedule, and the resources needed to create the digital notification system that will allow on-street parking immediately after a street has been swept. I am confident it can be done, and I don't think it's incredibly difficult. I get on my phone with annoying frequency alerts about every street closure in El Segundo and Culver City. They don't do me much good, but they're my neighboring cities, and for some reason, it's an LAPD or a law enforcement thing. We don't get the same alerts from LAPD as I do from the neighboring cities, but if the smaller cities can do it, I know that we can do it, and it's not a huge difference in task, particularly if we have the GPS stuff. And then the third thing I would ask is that I'd like to get a report when we come back in 90 days on the catalog and the mapping as I was just discussing.
Yes, sir.
Very good.
Anything else, colleagues? Does that work for everybody? Okay, so that's a direction.
Mr. Chair, will we be holding this in committee pending?
Yes.
Report back?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to item number 7, which is Maria.
Item number 7 is the DOT report in response to a Bonner and Blumenfield motion relative to directing DOT and the CAO to report on the necessary resources to electronically inventory all the city's parking assets in the public right-of-way, also known as Code the Curb.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Ken Husting with LA DOT Parking Management.
How are you doing?
Doing excellent. Glad to be here. So what we have before you is a proposal to create a digital inventory of the City of Los Angeles parking regulations posted in the public right-of-way. As you're probably aware, LA DOT does not have a comprehensive database of all the parking and traffic signs in the City of LA. The best attempt that we do have is where there's parking meters, we do know the parking regulations in that location. Otherwise, we have to either go to the field, look on Google Maps, or even check engineering plans. And so what we're looking to do is actually create this database for a number of reasons. One, to be able to better inform the public about what the parking regulations are across the city, to be able to promote app development, and also be able to reduce liability by knowing the state condition of those parking signs. So we estimate that we have more than 1 million signs posted in city streets. To be able to do this using city forces would prove to be very challenging. It'd be labor intensive. It wouldn't be very cost effective. So what we've been doing for the past couple of years is working with different companies to find out the technology that's out there. And we've even had a small scale demonstration with one contractor that yielded very promising results. And so with this contractor, what they do is they have camera equipment posted on a vehicle, and it's able to drive around, and using customized GPS software, it's able to capture the information, be able to geocode it to the location, and can even give physical attributes of the sign, such as the retroreflectivity. And so we estimate that to, at least with one of the vendors, and there's other vendors out there, we'd have to go out to an RFP, but we estimate that's going to cost anywhere between $4.4 million and $5.6 million. And so what we've done with the 5-year plan, we've estimated that at least 25% of that would come from the Special Parking Revenue Fund, or roughly about $1.1 million, and the remainder would need to be identified from such potential sources as Measure R, Prop A, Prop C. And so there's two different ways to carry this out. You can either do it in pieces, such as take the 1.1 million and do a portion of it, or if we're able to capture the entire funding for the whole project, we can take it citywide and do it in one fell swoop, and be able to capture not only the parking information, but also the traffic signs, which would be extremely useful, since they'll be covering all the same streets at the same time. And so with that, I'm willing to take any questions.
The data that we would get from this, would that be used just internally, or would it be open source so folks could develop apps to do stuff?
Well, I think what we're envisioning is that some of the information would be used internally as far as the retroreflectivity, because that's really more of a maintenance aspect and looking at from liability. But definitely when it comes to the parking regulations, we want to make sure that that information is available on the open data portal. And that enables app developers to go ahead and come up with different things that could be useful for people when they're trying to park in the city.
Have other cities done something similar?
I believe some smaller cities have done something, but the scale of the city of LA, I think we would be the largest metropolitan city to undertake this kind of effort.
Great. And how long do you think it would take?
It depends. If we are able to go citywide, we're looking at the whole process of being able to drive around the streets and catalog that information should just be within a few months. And then there's a lot of information that needs to be done on the back end as far as those non-standard signs, being able to properly code those correctly, which would take several months after that. So we're probably looking at 1 to 2 years to have everything citywide, standard and non-standard signs, or we could do it in a phased approach, which would take less. But again, we would still have to continue going throughout the city. And what we're hoping to do, which a point that I forgot to mention, is this would be a one-time effort. So we would have the contractor go out, capture all the information, and then we would maintain it on our side by integrating it with our eWork system. That's our work order system. So whenever we change out a parking sign, a traffic sign, that would automatically go into the eWork system and update the database so that we keep a rolling, accurate inventory of what's out there.
So is it the department's recommendation to do the citywide, or is it the department's recommendation to do a pilot to kick it off?
Well, we'd love to be able to do citywide, but we understand that fiscal constraints, and so we're leaving it up to City Council to use their judgment whether or not they want to fund it citywide or to be able to do it in smaller pieces. But what we've proposed here in the report is to take a more incremental approach.
With the pilot?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And how would you structure an RFP for that purpose?
What we do is we probably structure it by having options. So what we could do is we come up with a pilot area that we're looking to have the contractor do, and that would be something that would fall theoretically within the 1.1 million. And we'd also have another pricing option for citywide, in case we're able to get that money to do this effort citywide. And so we would have the contractors bid on both elements, and depending on the funding, we'd be able to see how much we can do.
Okay. All right. Colleagues, any questions?
I have one question. What part of the city will be completed in the first year?
Actually, we haven't even determined that yet. Because right now, we're suggesting the 1.1 million, but the money hasn't actually been set aside yet through the budget.
So when do you expect the process to begin?
Well, after we, through the budget, so the money would be set aside next fiscal year, and so we would start probably putting together, assuming the money is there, put together the RFP as soon as the fiscal year starts, so theoretically July.
Yep, my question is the same line. So if we find about 1.1 of the 4.4, it's about, we'll be able to do roughly a quarter of the city?
We're hoping, but again, it's get varied estimates depending on the contractor and the technology. So we're hoping that would be it, but we won't know until we issue the RFP and get the proposals back.
Do you have any idea on how you're going to select the pilot project areas?
At this point, I don't. We really haven't given it too much thought as far as what we would do as far as the pilot area.
Okay. Because we could suggest a lot of it different areas. So love to work with you on that.
I appreciate it.
Yeah,
We'd appreciate that.
Jay Kim from DOT. I guess there's different ways to perhaps approach it. One thing that we could do is in thinking of how the public might make use of this information. We can also look at areas where there's been a lot of enforcement activity or perhaps violations, where if it could be a benefit to the public in that regard, that could possibly be used as a filter. And I think we can have that ongoing discussions, with the committee members and others to sort of come back to you guys with a more of a solid approach on how we would actually select those areas.
And when you say enforcement activity, it's twofold, right? There's areas where it's too much enforcement, and there's areas where they want more enforcement. So,
absolutely true.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Well, one last question. I'm sure you looked into this, but I just wanted to ask: is there any way to incorporate existing strategies? Because, like the camera you're talking about, is exactly what Google does to map out all the streets. We can't just piggyback on their platform and have a program where it already identifies what they already did, or?
Well, because Google, Street View, for example, it has a slightly different purpose. I'm pretty sure they're probably using very similar technology, but I think the difference is the algorithm in which you're interpreting transportation assets and parking assets.
Right.
And so there's also going to be some algorithm errors, and so it'll require some data scrubbing. And so it's probably a lot more complicated than taking what Google has done and then just being able to transpose all that.
We've got to redo it.
Yeah, so they'll have to be a different process. It's similar technology, but a different process.
And then also with the technology that we're looking at, it would be able to give us the physical attributes of the sign as far as retroreflectivity. And Google wouldn't be able to have that information based on what they have now. And so there's proprietary software by different companies that would be making use of.
Great. Okay. So the department's recommendation then is to request that the resources be considered in next year's budget to appropriate $1.1 million from the Special Parking Revenue Fund for the initial phase of this effort.
Yes.
So by approving this today, what we're doing is we're asking for that to be included in the next year's budget. I actually like this. I like this approach to budgeting and governance. Actually, just as in Congress or in the state legislature, the subject matter committee sort of reviews proposals and makes recommendations, and then the budget committee has to come up with the money for the ones it supports. I think it's important for us to be saying, as we enter the budget season, here are things that are important to members of this committee, and Code the Curb and these parking reform efforts are part of it. So,
glad to hear it.
So without objection, that's the direction of the committee.
Great. Thank you very much.
I just wanted to say, you didn't fill out a card on this one, Jay. Did you want to say anything on this? Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you.
And that brings us to item number 8.
Item number A is the DOT report in response to a bond and price motion relative to implementation of the LA Express Park program in Venice, Expo USC, and Hollywood, and further expansion of the program citywide.
And for this one, we do have a speaker card from Jay, so if you want to come on up on this one. And just as we start this one, this is a program that I describe as a win-win-win. It has been absolutely successful downtown. It has increased parking space utilization by more than 15%, which is amazing. It's reduced the average hourly parking rate by over 10%, which is huge and a benefit to folks who need parking spaces. And it's actually given us a modest increase in gross revenue from parking of almost 3%. So that's pretty good. And it's the kind of system that I want to see throughout the city. So the goal here is to accelerate it as quickly as possible to sort of make Express Park happen in an express fashion. Ideally, I'd like us to get to a fine system that is similarly structured so that you pay less for violating a parking situation if it's non-peak than when it's peak. But that's a conversation we'll be having in June. Today we're focused just on the Express Park component. So what we wanted in the motion was an accelerated schedule. Can you give us an update on that after Jay gives his public comment?
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. When we made these recommendations to the committee in October, there were a number of parts of that recommendation under demand-based pricing, one of which is to look at the option of replacing or relaxing arbitrary time limits with a tiered pricing structure. Another was a payment in, payment out system or a payment in refund system, something of that nature. Expanding the deployment of advanced parking meter technology, like being able to pay remotely with a smartphone app, receiving text alerts on the time remaining, remotely adding additional time, things of that nature. I think some of the meters can already do that. And also going back to a payment card sort of system like a tap card. We didn't see much or any of that in the report back this time, so I'm speaking now for the entire group, which is that we would like to see a report back specifically addressing those particular items. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jay. Okay. Please go ahead.
Okay. I'm Pierre Gant. I'm in the Park and Meter Division. I've been the project manager of Express Park since October of 2008 and have been responsible for the installation of Express Park downtown and Express Park in Westwood. You have asked what it would take to accelerate our program, and we right now have a staff adequate to meet our present schedule, but to accelerate it, we believe that we would need a Senior Management Analyst 2 as an addition to the staff, an upgrade of a Management Analyst 1 to a Management Analyst 2, and to introduce a Transportation Engineering Associate 4. The staff right now has been myself and a Management Analyst and then some support from the rest of the Park and Meter Division, but the key element of the staff has been we've got 2 full-time Xerox analysts. And the Xerox contract is up in September of 2017, so we envision that by the addition of staff, we would actually be able to take over all of the program in-house and not have the need for a contractor. So as a result, when you look at the table which summarizes the cost, you can see that the costs go up only slightly, and in fact they go up as we add staff and don't get back down on Xerox, and in the end is up just a modest amount for salaries to $545,000.
So what we've also done here is identified the future expansion locations of LA Express Park.
Yep.
So we currently have funding for Hollywood Express Park. That was in a form of a CRA, Call for Projects grant that was issued by Metro, and that's entitled Hollywood Integrated Modal Information System, or HIMIS for short.
Yeah.
And we also received through the Call for Projects money for Venice and also Exposition Park USC. And in the future, we're also looking to take it to La Brea, Miracle Mile, North Hollywood, and Studio City. And we're hoping that as the Call for Projects comes along or any other grant opportunities, that we'll continue to find grant funds to expand LA Express Park.
Anything else?
Well, I probably could. Well, actually, you know what? What I'll do is I'll just go ahead and add. Based on our current staffing resources, for us to be able to target all those different areas that I mentioned, we're looking at a completion date of fiscal year 2025. If we're able to get the resources that we mentioned prior, we could bring that down to fiscal year 2020. So it would make a huge difference as far as our ability to expand LA Express Park in a more timely manner.
What actually needs to be done to make it happen, like physically?
You require occupancy data on a 24/7 for all of the parking spaces on the street. Currently, we're doing that with sensors in the street. There are other technologies coming along that we will be looking at. And as a matter of fact, a major part of this program going forward will be staying abreast of the most current technologies to make sure that we're not spending money foolishly. We may be able to bring the cost down, for example, on these future projects by using alternative means of measuring demand.
I would imagine it gets cheaper as time goes on.
Yeah, well, I mean, the point is that as you look at each area, and I'm suggesting in here that we do a parking survey before we start the project, it allows you then, based on the experience we've had to date, to come up with a strategy for getting the sensor information that is the most cost-effective strategy of doing it. When we went into downtown, we were naive. We didn't know what we didn't know. And so we went with a it was cutting edge, but on the other hand, it was a relatively conventional approach. If we put a sensor in every space and monitor it 24/7, we'll have the data we need. That was, at the time, it turned out it was quite expensive. And those prices have come down, as many things have come down over the years as the technology improves. But I think there's a potential for even greater savings by staying abreast of the most current technology in the industry. And that'll be very much a part of this team going forward.
But it's about sensors. We don't need new meters, just new sensors?
Well, when we go into an area for LA Express Park, we reevaluate all the parking policies to make sure that they're consistent with what the businesses actually need.
Right.
We also do upgrade the parking equipment. And so the parking equipment that's in Hollywood right now, for instance, I'm just using that one as an example, there's tremendous opportunity for us to upgrade that equipment to make it just batteries last longer, more user-friendly when it comes to pay stations, to have something that's going to be multilingual, that's going to be more international friendly. So it's looking at the parking policies, upgrading the technology, working with the community to make sure that what we're implementing is what will actually benefit them.
But we've been putting new meters over the past few years. We've been installing new meters.
We have been phasing out the old ones that have gone obsolete.
So the new ones we've installed outside of the current downtown Express Park area, are those already compatible, or would those need to be replaced as well?
It depends on the technology that we're looking at. So many of those are compatible, but say, for instance, in Westwood, we did something that's a little bit more high-tech. So we're actually looking at the capability of using Apple Pay. So you just go over, bring your phone to the parking meter and it pays for it. And so if we want to have that technology, then some of the parking meters that we've already installed in other areas of the city, even though they're relatively new, they would need to be upgraded for that type of capability.
There's at least one person who thinks that's how you should do it in Venice.
That's how it should be. We should make it as convenient as possible.
There was one other thing we did in Westwood, which by integrating the sensor with the meter, which we did not do downtown because we had independent vendors for the sensors and the meters, we're able to introduce a no meter feeding policy that's reinforced by technology. In other words, you go and park at 8:30 in the morning and it's a 2-hour limit. Until that car moves, the meter will not accept additional money. So what's happened is very dramatically. We were getting, prior to installing that, we were getting 65 instances a day, which were clearly meter feeding. We've got that down to 2 per day, and that's only because the system failed and allowed the payment. So it's basically really discouraged the meter feeding and has given greater turnover in the Westwood area, which was something the merchants were screaming for. And we did that through technologies. That technology is not available on all of our meters right now.
So let me ask a sort of wonky question. What is the difference between demand-based pricing and dynamic pricing, and Which of those models have we used downtown, and which are we looking to use as we go forward?
Okay, when we started downtown, we really did not know what to anticipate with regard to demand. And so when we launched Express Park, we said we're going to do three things. We're going to first, phase one is we're going to set prices based on the overall demand for the day. And phase two was we were going to introduce a time of day pricing where we tried to fit those segments of the day with the demand at that time. And that's the demand-based pricing. Phase three, we did dynamic pricing, which actually had the meter in real time react to the demand on the street at the time. To the best of my knowledge, we're the only city,
We're the first city.
absolutely, we're the first city to do it. I know of no other city that did it. And what we found is that, first of all, it took a relatively sophisticated algorithm that had to be identified to do this, because you had to have an algorithm that blended historical demand at that location with current demand. Otherwise, you would get pricing and demand would be way out of sync. We were able to demonstrate it. It worked well. But we also discovered in the course of Express Park that the demand during the day was very predictable. That during the weekday, the demand pattern from 8 to 8 was quite consistent from day to day and from week to week. And therefore, the refinement of a real-time demand-based pricing was really not required. It did not bias much, or if anything at all. And so we really focused on time of day pricing, which right now downtown is 8 to 11, 11 to 4, and 4 to closing. In Westwood, it's 8 to 10, 10 to 3, and 3 to closing. And the reason with the different time bands in Westwood is that demand patterns are different.
Something else too that we noticed with the dynamic pricing is because you have a parking meter that is always at a ready state of alert. So it's going like, did I get a payment? What's going on? It's constantly chiming in to get information. So what it did is actually decrease the battery life. So a battery that would normally last 1 or 2 years would be only lasting months. And so it was a lot of additional cost and burden to keep the dynamic pricing and having to replace those batteries when turns out that the pattern was fairly predictable. So it made more sense to go just demand-based.
So I understand that was the case for downtown.
Yeah.
And it could be the case for Westwood, but we don't know yet, because just as we roll into other areas, we don't know what we don't know yet.
Exactly.
We did in downtown.
Absolutely.
Dynamic might be more appropriate in other areas, right?
And we will be examining that
So
when
we're
we
keeping
do
our
the
mind
survey.
open to that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So, but, just want to tout again, we were the first city, and as far as we know in the world, definitely the nation, to do dynamic pricing.
And I think we may be, to my knowledge, and I've been to conferences all over the world and parking, I have not discovered another location that's actually done it. But I'm not saying that just because I don't know what I don't know.
Yeah, well, and 3 years from now, maybe everybody's going to be doing it because the technology.
Well, not only that, if you look 3 to 5 years from now, I mean, there's people that saying parking meters will be gone. They'll all be done by GPS and all. And we're open to all of that. Right. As technology and the smartphone penetration gets even greater. But so right now, again, we're in that we don't know what we don't know, but we want to have the resources to be able to stay current.
And on your acceleration efforts, I imagine that Metro is a potential source of funding to help accelerate. Have you guys had any conversations with Metro?
So we haven't had a conversation regarding this accelerating Venice or Exposition Park, but we have had conversations previously. And Metro has been very willing to advance funding because there's so many projects that have fallen behind across the entire county. And so there's opportunities to move the money up so that it's better for everybody, and it helps Metro meet air quality conformance. And so we believe that they are willing, but if we are given direction, we'll definitely approach Metro and confirm their willingness.
And report back to you.
Great, okay, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah.
And if I can be helpful.
Oh, absolutely. We'll let you know.
Yeah. Mr. Rue?
Just a clarification question. When you said with the necessary resources, you could get all your projects done by 2020, is that just a Is it all the 6 projects, or just up to the exposition?
No, it's going to be all the way up to Studio City.
Oh, but, so you have the source of funding for Miracle Mile, North Hollywood, and Studio City?
No. Right now, what we're envisioning, if we're not
When you say resources, you're saying including the funding?
including the
Oh, I
yes,
thought you just
including the funding. No, we're going to actively go after grant funding. However, if we're not able to secure grant funding, then we're probably looking at SPRF, which again come back to council for their consideration.
Okay, looks like no further questions. So the recommendation from DOT was to request an upgrade of Management Analyst 1 to Management Analyst 2, to authorize new position authorities for one Senior Management Analyst 2 and a Transportation Engineering Associate 4, and to advance the appropriation of $218,000 in local match from the SPRF for the accelerated implementation of LA Express Park in Venice from FY20 to 2017. I'd also like to, well, I guess that's going to go to council. If we approve that, that goes to council, right?
Yes.
Okay. So that'll be the direction of the committee. I'd also like, though, to have a report back separately, and I'm not sure, Adam, how we do this.
We can incorporate that into the committee report.
Okay, yeah, a report back separately on, to this committee on the opportunities from funding for Metro, and also on the issues that Mr. Bieber raised about some of the additional elements that we could be doing with Express Park.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so that's the direction of the committee, and with that, we have completed the balance of the agenda, and we are adjourned. Thank you. Thank you.